After entering the city, the two walked side by side through the bustling crowd. All of a sudden, Lawanji asked, "How is the curse mark?" Wei Wuxian, "Jinliang was buried too close to our dear friend and got stained with quite a lot of resentful energy. It faded a bit, but it's not completely gone. The chances are we can only find a way to remove it after we find the whole corpse, or at least the head. It doesn't really cause much trouble anyways." The dear friend was none other than the man that had been cut to pieces. Since they didn't know who he was, Wei Wuxian suggested that they referred to him as a dear friend. Lawanji didn't say anything after hearing it, but he didn't object to it either, which could be interpreted as a silent approval. Of course, he himself wouldn't ever use the word. Lawanji, "How much is a bit?" Wei Wuxian indicated with his hands. "A bit is just a bit. How do I explain it? Should I take my clothes off and show you?" Lawanji's brows shifted slightly, as if he was actually worried that Wei Wuxian would strip right here and right now. He replied with an indifferent tone, "Take them off after we return." Wei Wuxian laughed, whirled around and walked a few steps facing backward. Before, in order to escape as soon as possible, he desperately tried to disgust others, from feigning madness to purposely losing face. Now that his identity was revealed, if he were anyone else, he would have extremely ashamed remembering all those things he did. Only someone with a face as thick as Wei Wuxian would carry on as if he wasn't involved in anything. Speaking of it, if he were anyone else with at least some face, he would never have done ridiculous things such as climbing into someone's bed at night, insisting on sharing a bathtub together, and asking if he looked pretty after putting on makeup. Since he pretended that he didn't remember anything, Lawanji naturally refrained from bringing up the subject, the two acting as if nothing had happened. Today was the first time he made such a joke again after his identity was no longer a secret. When he finished laughing, Wei Wuxian immediately put on a serious face. "Hangunjun, do you think that the people who set our dear friend's hand in Movalage and made it attack your juniors, and the people who sewed his legs on another corpse and buried them in the wall, are the same group of people?" Both in the past and the present, in his mind, he directly called Lawanji by his first name, but he got used to the last few days of calling him by his title. Besides, him calling this name created a tone of exaggerated seriousness, sounding unexplainably funny. Thus, when they were outside, he continued to call him in such a semi-earnest way. Lawanji, "There are two groups." Wei Wuxian, "Well, I agree. Taking such pains to sew the legs to another corpse and hide them in a wall obviously mean that they didn't want the limbs to be discovered. If so, they wouldn't have purposely tossed out the left hand to attack the Gusulansax people, since it would definitely have caused attention and investigation. One went to great lengths to hide everything, while the other attacked rashly, almost as if it wanted to be discovered. They are probably not the same group of people." Everything that needed to be said had been said. Lawanji seemed like he didn't have anything else to say anymore, but responded with an approving anyway. Wei Wuxian turned around, speaking as he walked. "The people who hid the legs knew about the Xiang saber hole tradition, while the people who let the left hand loose knew about the Gusulansax plans. I don't think any of them have simple intents." there are more and more secrets. Lao Wanji, one step at a time. Wei Wuxian, how did you recognize me? Lao Wanji, think for yourself. Questions and answers passed quickly between them without even a moment of rest. Wei Wuxian originally wanted to wait until Lao Wanji was not paying attention and make him blurt out the answer to the last question. Even though he still didn't succeed, he wasn't discouraged at all and continued to switch the topics of their conversation at a quick pace. I've never been to Xiang before. I've always had other people to inquire about things for me. This time, I'm gonna take a break and you can go ask around. Would you mind, Hangonjin? Lao Wanji turned around and get going at once. Wei Wuxian immediately interrupted. Wait, Hangonjin! May I ask where you are going? Lao Wanji looked back. To find the cultivational sect of this area. Wei Wuxian tugged at his sword tussle and dragged him in the opposite direction. Why would you find them? This is their area. Even if they know, they wouldn't tell you. They either couldn't deal with it and hid it so that they didn't lose face, or tried as hard as they could since they didn't want other people to meddle with things. My Honorable Hanguanjun, it isn't that I want to purposely shame you, but you really can't do without me when handling things outside. If you ask around in such a manner, I'd be surprised if you actually managed to guess results. Although these words were a bit rude, tenderness pooled with Lao Wanji's eyes. Again, he spoke in a low voice. Wei Wuxian laughed. What did you for? That's not how you should have responded. Meanwhile, in his heart, he commented gleefully. Is the only thing he knows to say. He is still so stuffy. Lao Wanji, then how should I ask? Wei Wuxian pointed to the side. Go over there, of course. He pointed toward a wide street. Bright red banners of all shapes and sizes hung on both sides of the street, fluttering in the wind. Every single shop opened its doors widely with round black jars pasted from within to outside the entrance. There were also waiters holding trays of small liquor bowls, recommending their shops to the passerby. The strong scent of liquor drifted throughout the street. No wonder Wei Wuxian walked slower and slower. He stopped altogether when they arrived at the next street corner, and even dragged in Lao Wanji to a halt. Wei Wuxian put on a serious face. The waiters here are usually young and hardworking. With so many customers a day and so many mouths spreading gossip, nothing strange going on around the area would escape their eyes and ears. Lao Wanji replied with the but it was written all over his face that, you just want to have a few drinks, don't you? Wei Wuxian pretended as if he couldn't understand Lao Wanji's expression. Continuing to pull on the other's sword tussle, he stepped into the street of liquor shops with beaming eyes. At once, the waiters from 5 or 6 different shops came over, each more enthusiastic than the next. Would you like to taste? The He family's liquor is well known around the area. Young master, have a taste of this. You don't have to pay. If you enjoy the liquor, then come to our shop. This one doesn't smell strong, but wait until you drink it up. If you can still stand after you finish this, I'll adopt your surname. Hearing this, Wei Wuxian responded, Very well. he took over the liquor bowl that waiter held, drank it up, and showed him the emptied bowl with a grin. "Adopt my surname?" Surprisingly, the waiter wasn't scared. Sticking his chin up, he looked even more confident. "I mean if you drink a whole jar." "Wei Wuxian, then give me 3 jars." The waiter was more than delighted and rushed back inside the shop. Wei Wuxian turned to Lu Wenji. "We are doing business here, aren't we? First we help their business, then we talk about other things. After we pay, it'll be easy to get them talking." Lu Wenji took out money to pay. The two walked inside the shop. Inside, there were wooden tables and chairs for the customers to rest and chat. One of the other waiters in the shop saw how Lu Wenji looked and figured out that he wasn't the average person. Not daring to slight him, he only directed them to a table after he wiped the table and chairs for a long while. With 2 jars by his foot and another in his hand, Wei Wuxian chatted with the waiter for a few moments, then cut to the chase, asking again for any strange things that had happened in the area. The waiter was also a talkative person. He rubbed his hands together. "What sort of strange things?" "Haunted houses, deserted cemeteries, corpses that were cut apart and so on." The waiter's eyes darted back and forth between them. What do you do for a living?" "You and him?" "Wei Wuxian, haven't you guessed it already?" The waiter understood. "Of course, it's easy to guess. You two must be one of those cultivators who fly around in the clouds and heavens, especially the one next to you. Among average folks, I've never seen such Wei Wuxian grinned. "Such a pretty person." The waiter laughed. "If you say this, the young master next to you will be displeased. Strange things, wasn't it? They did happen. Not now, but 10 years ago. Walk in this direction. After you leave the city, walk for around 2 miles, and you'd see quite a lovely residence. I don't know if their signboard is still there or not. It's the Xiang clan's residence." "Wei Wuxian, what's wrong with the residence?" "The entire clan died," the waiter said. "You ask for strange things, so of course I'm telling you the strangest of things. The entire clan was wiped out, and I heard that they were frightened to death." Hearing this, Lu Wenji was absorbed in thought, appearing as if he remembered something. On the other hand, Wei Wuxian didn't notice anything. "Is there any cultivational sects stationed around the area?" "It must have been an extremely cruel being if it was able to frighten all members of an entire clan to death. Not every sect was like the Xiang sect, having difficulties that it couldn't mention. Most sects would never tolerate the appearance of something like this in the area." The waiter replied, "Yes, of course there is." Wei Wuxian, "Then how did they deal with the situation?" "Deal with the situation?" The waiter swung the cleaning rag onto his shoulder and also sat down, revealing the secret that he had been keeping in for so long. "Young master, do you know what the surname of the cultivational sect in Yueyang was? It was Xiang. The clan who died was their clan. If everyone died, who would there be to deal with this situation?" The Xiang clan that was wiped out had been the cultivational sect station in this area? Wei Wuxian had never heard of some Yueyang Chang sect before, meaning that it definitely wasn't a prominent sect. But the fact that a whole clan had been wiped out was definitely a significant event. He immediately asked, "How was the Chang clan wiped out?" The waiter, "This is what I've heard. One night, the noise of slamming on doors suddenly came from the clan's residence." Wei Wuxian, "The noise of slamming on doors?" "That's right. The slamming was so loud that it almost reached the heavens. In it, there came screams and cries as if everyone was locked inside, unable to come out. Strange, isn't it? The door was bolted from within, so if you were on the inside and you wanted to get out, you could have just open it. Why would you slam on the doors? Even if you slam on them, the people outside wouldn't be able to get you out. Besides, if you couldn't get out from the doors, couldn't you climb over the walls?" The people outside were quite confused. Everyone knew that the Chang clan was very powerful in the area because the people they cultivated. The head of their clan, Changpiang, I think, had a sword that could fly and have him stand on it as it flew. Say, something really happened inside and even his own clan couldn't take care of it. If ordinary people went over, wouldn't they have been searching over their own deaths? This was why nobody built any ladders or climbed over the walls to peek inside. Just like this, the night passed, and the wailing inside grew quieter and quieter. On the next day, as the sun came out, the doors of the Chang clan opened on their own. Within the house, among the men and women, 10 or so masters and a few dozens of servants, some sat, some lay, vomiting their bladders out. All of them were frightened to death. The owner of the liquor shop turned round and scolded, "You're gonna die. Why are you not working and telling old tales about people dying?" Wei Wuxian, 5 more jars, please." Lao Wanji paid the price for 10 jars. The owner beamed at once, warning the waiter, "Look after the customers properly. Don't go running around." Wei Wuxian, "You can continue." Without anything else to worry about, the waiter tried as hard as he could and continued the story in an animated voice. After then, for a long time, anyone who walked by the Chang residence at night could hear the noises of slamming on walls coming from the inside. Think about it. People like them who fly in the skies have seen countless ghosts and monsters before, yet they were frightened to death. How frightening would that have had to be? If you are often out at night, you definitely bump into some ghosts. Even after they were buried, you can hear them slamming on their coffins. Although the head of their clan, Champion, was away from home and survived, Wei Wuxian, didn't you say that the whole clan died? The waiter, take it easy. I was just about to mention that. Everyone did die. Although I said that he survived, it was only for a short while. After a few years, the clan's head, Champion, died as well. This time, the death was even more horrifying. He was killed by Liangqi with a sword. I don't need to tell you what Liangqi is, do I? It's when the flesh on someone's body is piece by piece sliced off with a saber or a sword for 3,600 times, until all of the flesh is gone and there's only a skeleton left. Of course, it was impossible for Wei Wuxian not to know what Liangqi was. If somebody wanted a book called 1,000 Ways to Die Agonizing Deaths, he'd have been the person who was most qualified to write it. He raised a hand. I understand. Then, do you know why the Xiang clan was wiped out? The waiter. I heard that it was planned by another cultivational sect. That's for sure, right? Or else, why did a bunch of people who could cultivate fail to escape? They were definitely trapped inside by something or someone. In case the conversation wasn't going well, the owner of the shop even brought over 2 side dishes of peanuts and sunflower seeds. Wei Wuxian nodded in acknowledgement and continued while eating sunflower seeds. Did anyone find out what exactly the something or someone was? The waiter laughed. Young master, now you're just joking. How could we ordinary people who are just trying to get through life know anything about those who fly around in the skies? Logically, you guys should know more than me since you all cultivate. I've only heard some vague talk of how they offended someone whom they shouldn't have. Anyways, after that, nobody was left in charge of the evil beings around Xiang. Wei Wuxian pondered. Somebody whom they shouldn't have offended? That's right. The waiter ate 2 peanuts. These sects or whatever indeed hold grudges against the others. I'm thinking that the Xiang clan must have been targeted by the other cultivators. Isn't killing people for the sake of treasures common or something? Those books all said so. Tales and legends as well. Although I don't know who exactly did it, it was apparently related to a very famous villain. Wei Wuxian smiled as he lifted the liquor bowl to his lips, glancing sideways at him. Let me guess. You're gonna say that you don't know who the villain was? The waiter cracked up. Guess again. I definitely know this one. He was called something along the lines of peculiar. Right, Patriarch, the Yiling Patriarch. Wei Wuxian chopped, letting out a series of bubbles into the liquor bowl with a splash. What? Him again? The waiter confirmed. Yep, that's right. His surname was Wei. He's called Wei Wuxian, I think. People sound both hateful and scared when they mention him. Wei Wuxian thought over it and determined 2 things. 1, he had never been to Xiang before. And 2, among all of the people he had killed, none of them died by Liangqi. He felt that this was a bit absurd and looked over at Lao Wenqi as if he wanted an explanation. Lao Wenqi had been waiting for this look since quite a while ago. He replied, "We're leaving." Wei Wuxian immediately understood. Lao Wenqi had something to say to him and it couldn't be said in the liquor shop under everyone's noses. He stood up. Then let's leave. How much? Right, it's been paid already. I'm leaving the liquor here for now. I'll continue drinking after we finish. He added half jokingly. Make sure it's still here when I get back. Having already finished more than half of the plate of peanuts, the waiter responded. Of course, our shop is honest to everyone, from the old to the young. Leave him here and don't worry. We'll wait until you come back to close our shop. Hey, young masters, are you going to the Xiang residence now? Wow, now that's pretty cool. I'm from the area and I haven't been there. Even. I've only dared to sneak a few looks at it from far away. Are you two going inside? What are you going to do? Wei Wuxian. We're also just gonna sneak a few looks from far away. The young waiter had an outgoing personality, getting friendly with strangers a bit too quickly. Although they only chatted for a short while, he was already treating Wei Wuxian as if they were friends. He came over to put his arm around Wei Wuxian's shoulder. Is the work that you two do hard? Do you earn lots of money? Probably a ton, right? What a respectable job. Let me ask you something. Is it difficult to get started? As he babbled, he suddenly shut his mouth, nervously looking to the side. He whispered, "Young master, why is the one beside you staring at me?" Wei Wuxian followed his gaze just to see Lao Wenqi turn around, stand up, and walk outside the liquor shop. Oh, him! This friend of mine was brought up strictly. He absolutely hates it when other people are being too comfortable with each other in front of him. Isn't that strange? The waiter awkwardly took away his arm, replying in a hushed voice, "Strange indeed. The way he looked over, you'd think that I was putting my arm around his wife." With Lao Wenqi's hearing ability, it was impossible for him to not catch something just because it was with a lowered voice. Imagining how he'd feel right now, Wei Wuxian tried so hard not to laugh that his stomach hurted. He quickly said to the waiter, "I finished the jar." The waiter, "I'm sorry?" Wei Wuxian pointed at himself. "I'm standing." Finally recalling the, "If you can still stand after you finish this, I'll adopt your surname," that he said earlier, he blurted out, Wow, I'm not kidding, but this is my first time seeing someone who can still stand and speak properly after downing a jar. Young master, what's your surname?" Wei Wuxian. "My surname..." Suddenly remembering the Wei Wuxian that the waiter mentioned, the corner of his lips twitched. He smoothly transitioned. "Islam." The waiter was also someone with a thick face, announcing without any change of expression, "Yes. From today on, my surname will be Lan." Under the bright red banners of the liquor shop, it seemed as if for 1 second Lao Wenqi's figure stumbled ever so slightly. With a mischievous smile on his face, Wei Wuxian walked over with his hands behind his back and patted his shoulder. "Hang Wenjun, to thank you for paying the bill, I made him adopt your surname." After they left the city, the two walked in the direction of where the waiter pointed at. The number of people gradually decreased, while the number of trees increased. Wei Wuxian asked, "Back then, why did you not let me continue asking him?" Lao Wenqi, "I suddenly remembered hearing about what happened in Yuyan. There was no need to continue asking." Wei Wuxian, "Before you tell me, let me ask you something. Confirm for me that one. Wiping out the Xiang clan wasn't done by me, was it?" Other than how he died 10 years ago and his soul had been fairly stable, it was impossible that he killed an entire clan and didn't remember anything. Lao Wenqi, "No." Wei Wuxian, "Oh." It was as if he returned to those days before he died of being even worse than a sewer rat, despised by everyone. He played a role in everything. He was to be blamed for everything. Even if one's neighbor's grandson didn't eat properly and lost 5 pounds, It was because the child was frightened by stories of the Yilim patriarch commanding the ghost general to murder people. However, Lawanchi spoke again. The killing was not done by you, but it was related to you. Wei Wuxian, what's the relationship? Lawanchi, there are two relationships. First, one of the people who were connected to it shared a past with your mother. Wei Wuxian stopped in his tracks. He didn't know what he was feeling at the moment or how his face looked. Pausing for a moment, he spoke. My mother? Wei Wuxian was the son of Wei Changzi, a servant of the Yumenqian sect, and Sangzi Sanren, a rock cultivator. Both Jiang Femian and his wife, Yu Ziyuan, were quite familiar with Wei Wuxian's parents. Despite this, Jiang Femian never reminisced about his old friend in front of Wei Wuxian, and moreover, Yu Ziyuan never spoke properly to Wei Wuxian at all. It was lucky for him if she didn't give him a few whips and send him to kneel in the ancestral hall so that he'd keep his distance from Jiangchen. Other people told him most of the things he knew about his parents. He really didn't know much more than what everyone else knew. Lawanchi also halted, turning round to look at him. Have you heard of the name Xiang? Wei Wuxian searched through his memories. No. Lawanchi. No is correct. He was well known when he left the mountain 12 years ago. Now nobody mentions him. 12 years ago just happened to be 1 year after the siege at Yiliang's Luanseng Hill, which means that he only just missed it. Wei Wuxian asked, What's the mountain? Who taught him? Lawanchi, I do not know which mountain it was. His was taught by a cultivator. Xiao Xiangchen was a pupil of Baoshan Sanren. Wei Wuxian finally understood why Lawanchi said that this person shared a past with his mother. So that means Xiao Xiangchen is my Shishu. Sangzi Sanren was also a pupil of Baoshan Sanren. Baoshan Sanren was a cultivator who lived secluded from the rest of the world, rumored to be of the same generation as Wen Mao and Lang An. Most of the heroes from that generation had already returned to dust, yet Baoshan Sanren was said to have still remained unfallen. If it really was so, then she must be hundreds of years old and have quite a high level of cultivation. Back then, with the lead of Wen Mao, the cultivation world focused on the rise of the clans instead of sects. And cultivational forces connected by blood ties rose as if they were bamboo shoots after a spring rain. Without exception, every cultivator who was slightly famous chose to find a sect. Yet, this cultivator decided to retire into solitude, living in a mountain under the cultivational name of Baoshan Sanren. Nobody knows, though, which mountain she was embracing. Speaking of it, it was only called retiring into solitude because nobody knew. If after one retired into solitude they could still be found easily, it wouldn't be called retiring into solitude anymore. She lived in an unknown celestial mountain and would often secretly take abandoned children up the mountain to be her pupils. However, all of the pupils had to vow that they would devote their whole lives to cultivation, never leaving the mountain or entering human society. or else, no matter what the reason was, they were never to go back again. They'd need to depend on themselves to survive in the mortal world, cutting all ties with their teacher. Everyone spoke highly of Baoshan Sunren for her foresight in setting this rule. This was because during the few hundreds of years, only 3 of her pupils left the mountain: Yan Liang Daoren, Sangse Sunren, and Xiao Xiang Chen. Of these 3 pupils, none died a peaceful death. Wei Wuxian knew about the fates of the first and second pupils ever since he was young, so no further explanations were needed. Thus, Lao Wenji told him the stories of the last pupil, his Shishu. When Xiao Xiang Chen left the mountain, he was only 17. Lao Wenji had never met him in person, but he had heard about Xiao Xiang Chen's talent from others. At that time, the Sanshut campaign only finished a few years ago, and the siege at Yiliang's Luanseng Hill had just ended. All of the prominent sects were recruiting qualified cultivators from all around to be part of them. Xiao Xiang Chen left the mountain in hopes of saving the world. With his excellent talent and capable teacher, during his first night hunt, he held a hostile whisk in one hand and a long sword in the other, entering the mountain alone and claiming first prize. He became famous overnight. As the sect saw such a bright, gifted cultivator at such a young age, they all invited him to their sects. Yet, Xiao Xiang Chen turned down all of the offers. He said that he didn't want to depend on any sects, but he wanted to build a new sect with a close friend that didn't value a bloodline. He had a soft personality but a solid heart, gentle on the outside but determined on the inside. Whenever someone had a difficult matter at hand, the first thing they thought of was to find him for help. As a person of moral integrity, he never refused either, which was why people often spoke of him with a praiser. That was around when the wiping out of the Yueyang clan happened. One day, the Yueyang clan's leader went out night hunting with a few family members for about half a month. In the middle of the night, without any warning, they received the bad news and immediately hurried back. After the morning, they only found out that someone purposely destroyed their protective array and let in a group of powerful evil spirits. Other than that, they knew nothing. In most cases, only few people knew about the tragedies that happened in smaller clans. But the circumstances back then were different. The Sanshut campaign finished long ago, while the siege at Luanseng Hill only just ended. On the surface, the situation seemed rather stable. With the sudden disclosure of this event, the entire cultivation world was bubbling with discussion, some even exaggerating that it was the revenge of the revived Yilin patriarch, Wei Wuxian. However, there wasn't any evidence, so it had been impossible to find the killer. Of course, Xiao Xiang Chen didn't sit back and do nothing. He volunteered to be responsible for the matter and found out the truth for Changpiang. After a month, the murderer was finally discovered. The murderer's name was Xueyang. Xueyang was even younger than Xiao Xiang Chen, nothing more than just a boy. Despite this, he definitely didn't tone down on his cruelty just because he was young. Ever since the age of 15, he had been a delinquent in the area of Kuichao, known far and wide for his radiant smile, inhuman means, and merciless personality. Everyone's expressions changed whenever he was brought up in a conversation. When he was a child dwelling in the streets, it was said that he developed a hatred that lasted for years toward Champion's father. He committed this crime in a vengeance and for some other reasons. After Xiang found out the truth, he went across 3 provinces and Xiang was still happily picking fights with others. Taking advantage of the discussion conference that was happening at the Jinliang Tower of the Lanlianjin sect's residence, when the most prominent sects met up and discussed cultivational methods, Xiang brought him over, explained the situation and demanded severe punishment. With his straightforward list of evidence, most sects didn't have any objections except for one, the Lanlianjin sect. Wei Wuxian. Objecting in such a situation would be placing itself against the entire world. Could it be that Xiang was a favorite with Qin Guanshen? Lao Wenqi. A guest disciple. Wei Wuxian. He was a foreign disciple? Back then, the Lanlianjin sect was already one of the 4 most prominent sects, right? Why would they have invited a delinquent to be a guest disciple? Lao Wenqi. This is the second connection. He stared into Wei Wuxian's eyes. Because of this Taijin tiger seal. Wei Wuxian's heart immediately skipped a beat. The phrase was definitely not a stranger to him. On the contrary, nobody was more familiar to those 3 words than him. Among all of the spiritual weapons he had forged when he was still alive, this was the scariest and most famous one. When Wei Wuxian first created it, he didn't think too much about it. Single-handedly controlling corpses and spirits, of course he'd occasionally grew tired. Remembering a rare piece of iron ore he happened to have seen in a beast's stomach, he used it to cast a tiger seal. But after the tiger seal has been created, Wei Wuxian only used it once before finding out that it did more harm than good. The Stygian tiger seal's powers were considerably greater than what he had imagined. He originally wanted to use it to assist him, but its powers were almost exceeding him, its creator. Moreover, it didn't settle on one single master. This meant that if someone got hold of it, no matter who they were, whether they were good or bad, friend or foe, they were able to use it. After the seal had been forged, it wasn't that Wei Wuxian never thought about destroying it. But since the seal was created with much difficulty, it would have been extremely hard to destroy, costing him both time and energy. And back then, he had already vaguely understood that he wasn't in a good situation and would be hated by everyone sooner or later. With the weapon as appealing as a Stygian tiger seal, others didn't dare to act rashly, so he temporarily kept it. He separated the seal into 2 halves, making it so that they could only be of use when they were put together and never used without careful consideration. He had only used it 2 times before, and both times caused great bloodshed. The first time was during the Sunshot campaign. After using it for the second time, he finally decided to destroy 1 half of the seal. Before he could completely destroy the other half, the siege at Luang Zheng Hill happened, and it had since then been destroyed his capabilities. Toward his own creation, Wei Wuxian was confident to say that even if the sect that got hold of it made a temple for it and offered it incense every single day, the remaining half of the tiger seal was just a piece of scrap iron. However, Lao Wanji told him something shocking. It appeared that Xiang could rebuild the other half of the seal. Although Xiang was young, he was also quite clever, a bizarre eccentric. The Lan Lianqin sect discovered that he could use the remaining half of the seal to roughly piece together the other half. Even though the recreated version wasn't as powerful and couldn't be used for as long, it could already result in terrible catastrophes. Wei Wuxian understood. The Lan Lianqing needed to keep Xiang so that he could continue to restore the Stygian tiger seal, so they had to protect him. Perhaps Xiang destroying the Chang clan wasn't entirely to avenge what they did to him when he was young. He might have been testing on this clan of live humans what exactly was the extent of the restored Stygian tiger seal's powers. No wonder the rumors connected the case to him. Wei Wuxian could almost imagine those cultivators clenching their teeth. That Wei Wuxian! If we didn't make this, our world wouldn't have encountered so many disasters. Returning to the original thread of conversation, they continued about what happened at the Jinliang Tower. Although the Lan Lianqin sect was determined on protecting Xiang, Xiao Xiangchen didn't waver either. As the stalemate continued, they finally startled Chief Sung Ni Mingjue, who didn't intend on participating in the discussion conference. He hurried over to Jinliang Tower from far away. In spite of Ni Mingjue being a junior to Jing Guanshen, he conducted himself in a strict manner and refused to tolerate Xiang no matter what. With an angry lecture, Jing Guanshen was left with no words and a great deal of embarrassment. Ni Mingjue, as the irritable person he was, unsheathed his saber on the spot with the intention of killing Xiang. Even when his sworn younger brother Liang Fenzun, Jing Yao, attempted to ease the situation, he ordered him to leave. After harsh scolding, Jing Yao hid behind Lan Shichen, not daring to say anything else. In the end, the Lan Lianqin sect could only give in. Ever since Xiang was brought to Jinliang Tower by Xiao Xiangchen, he hadn't been scared at all. Even when Ni Mingjue's saber was pressed against his neck, he still had a grin on his face. Before he was taken away, he spoke affectionately to Xiao Xiangchen. Dao-chan, you wouldn't forget me, would you? Let's wait and see. At this point, Wei Wuxian knew that the wait and see could make Xiao Xiangchen pay an agonizing price. The Lan Lianqin sect was indeed the sect with the thickest face. Although on Jinliang Tower it promised in front of all of the sects that Xiang would be executed, when it left Ni Mingjue's side, it immediately shot Xiang in the dungans and changed the original decision to a life sentence. Hearing about the matter, Ni Mingjue was enraged and pressed on them again. The Lan Lianqin sect rambled about, refusing to give him Xiang no matter how hard he tried. All of the other sects watched them from the sidelines. But shortly afterward, Ni Mingjue passed away from Qi deviation. He cultivated at a faster speed than any other past leader of the Ni sect and also died sooner than any of them. Now that the person who was most difficult to deal with was gone, the Lanlian sect became more and more reckless and started to think of worse ideas. Jing Guanshen started to try as hard as he could to get Xiang out of the dungeons so that he could continue to restore and examine the Stygian tiger seal. However, this wasn't exactly something to be proud of. It was impossible for him to save the murderer of an entire clan from the dungeons without a valid reason. So they turned their attention to Champion. From coercion to harassment, in the end, the Lanlian sect finally pressured Champion into correcting his words, invalidating all of his past speeches. He announced that the wiping out of the Chang clan had nothing to do with Xiang. Hearing the news, Xiao Xiangchen visited him to inquire upon the matter. Changpeng responded helplessly. "What can I do aside from this? If I don't tolerate it, the rest of our clan's people wouldn't be safe for long. I'm really grateful, Dao Chang, but please don't help me anymore. Now, helping me would be harming me. I don't want the Yueyang Chang sect to end yet." And thus, the tiger had been set free back to the mountains. Wei Wuxian stayed silent. If he were Changpeng, he wouldn't have cared how prominent or powerful the Lanlian sect was, or how much glory the road ahead offered him, and he wouldn't have let the matter go. Instead, he would have went to the dungeons on his own, cut Xiang up so that he was nothing more than a puddle of flesh on the ground, and summon his soul back to repeat the process to the point that he regretted over being born in this world. But not everyone was like him, preferring to perish together with his enemy. Some of the Chang clan's people were still alive. Changpeng was also still young, single, and childless, having just took his first few steps on the path of cultivation. No matter if he was threatened with the lives of his remaining family members or his own future and cultivation, he had to think carefully. Of course, he wasn't Champion himself. He couldn't be angered or worried in a place of Champion, and he couldn't bear Champion's share of mental and physical torment. After Xiang had been released, he started to take revenge again. However, this time the revenge wasn't on Xiao Xiangchen himself. Xiao Xiangchen left the mountain alone and had no family. He only had a friend that he met afterward named Songlan. Songlan was also a cultivator of the time. He was a righteous, determined person and had a fair amount of appraisal. Both of them wanted to build a sect that valued common ideals instead of blood ties, which made them the closest and most like-minded of friends. The people of the time described them as such: Xiao Xiangchen, the bright moon and gentle breeze; Song Sishen, the distant snow and cold frost. Xiang put his hand to this site. Repeating his past technique, he wiped out the Bai Shui temple where Songlan grew up and studied at, and used poison to blind Songlan's eyes. This time, with this experience of wiping out a sect, he made sure to not leave any evidence, although everybody knew that he was the one who did it. What would be the use of that? There wasn't any evidence, and with Jing Guanshen's deliberate protection and the death of the violent Chief Sung, nobody could do anything about him. Wei Wuxian found this a bit strange. Although Lao Wanji looked as if he didn't care about anything, from Wei Wuxian's past experiences with him, he absolutely couldn't stand wrongdoings, possibly even more than the Ni Huaisang's older brother. Back then, the Lanlianchin sect had been dishonest ways of doing things, and Lawanchi never bothered to be subtle about them. Even until now, he always refused to go to their sect's discussion conferences. If 2 cruel massacres happened, the news would have probably spread over the entire cultivational world, and Lawanchi definitely would have turned a blind eye to them. Why would he not go and give Xiang what he deserved? Just as he was about to ask, he remembered the scars and the discipline whip gave him. 1 lash of the discipline whip would already be quite severe. If Lawanchi made some sort of a grave mistake and received so many lashes, he had probably been grounded for a few years. It is likely that he was either going through his punishment or waiting for his wounds to heal during the years when the incidents happened. No wonder he said he only heard about what happened. For some reason in his heart, Wei Wuxian cared a lot about those scars. However, it was inconvenient for him to ask directly, so he had to hold his thoughts for now. Then, what happened to Daochang Xiaoxiangchen afterwards? What happened afterward was certainly a tragic ending. When he left the mountain and his teacher, Xiaoxiangchen vowed that he would never go back again. He was a man of his words, but since Songlan was not only blind but also badly injured, he broke his vow and carried Songlan back to Baoshan Sanren's residence, asking her to save his friend. For the sake that they were once teacher and pupil, Baoshan Sanren agreed. Thus, Xiaoxiangchen left the mountain once more, and he was never seen again. A year later, Songlan also left the mountain. To everyone's surprise, his eyes, which were completely blinded, saw light again. However, it wasn't that Baoshan Sanren's medicinal skills created a miracle, but that Xiaoxiangchen dug his own eyes out and gave them to Songlan, who was only involved in this because of him. Songlan originally wanted to seek revenge on Xiang. At this time, Jing Guanshen had already passed away. Jing Guanyao took over the Lanlianchin sect and the position of sect leader. To show that things were going to be different, the first thing he did after he came to power was to get rid of Xiang. Aside from never mentioning the Stygian tiger seal again, he also made amends to restore the sect's reputation, suppressing the rumors. Songlan went to search for his past friend's whereabouts. At first, people still heard talk about where he traveled to. After some time, he also disappeared. Moreover, the Yueyang Chan sect was a small clan that was generally unheard of, and thus a lot of things gradually faded away. Having finished listening to the long story, Wei Wuxian sighed softly. A feeling of regret sprouted inside him. Meeting such an end because of something not related to him at all? It really was. If Xiaoxiangchen was born a few years earlier, or if I died a few years later, things wouldn't have had to be like this. If I was alive, how would I have not taken part in the matter? How would I have not made friends with such a person? Immediately afterward, he laughed at himself bitterly. I would have done something. What could I have done? If I was still alive back then, perhaps the Yueyang Chan sect's case didn't even need to be investigated before. Everyone decided that I did it. if the Zhao Cheng Xiao Chen bump into me on the streets and I chatted with him, invite him to drink together, it's likely that he'd hit me with his hostile whisk. Haha. They had already walked past the Chang residence toward the cemetery nearby. Wei Wuxian saw the dark red character of Chang on the pillow and asked, "Then why did Chang Piang die afterward? Who killed the remaining members of his clan?" Before Lao Wanqi could answer, a series of bangs came from amid the blue-tinted dusk. The noise sounded a lot like slamming on doors, but it wasn't. The bangs were carried out with force and at a fast pace, without a moment of rest. They sounded somewhat muffled, as if there was something separating them from the outside world. Their faces immediately changed. The 50 or so people of the Yueyang Chan sect were currently lying in their coffins, slamming on their coffins' lids from the inside. It was at night. They were frightened to death. They madly slammed on the doors, but there wasn't anyone to let them out. This was the slamming on coffins in the Chang clan cemetery that the liquor shop's waiter talked about. However, the waiter said that the haunting was 10 years ago and stopped long before now. Why would the slamming happen to start again when they came? Without passing any words between them, Wei Wuxian and Lao Wanqi both softened their breathing, stealthily moving without making a sound. Propping themselves against the pillars of the pillow, they both saw that in the center of the cemetery there was a hole amid the tombstones. It was a deep, recently created hole with piles of dirt surrounding it. Faint noises came from within the hole. Someone was digging out a grave. The two of them held their breaths, attentively waiting for the person in the hole to come out on their own. Before an hour passed, two people hopped up from inside the open grave. Wei Wuxian and Lao Wanqi could tell that these were two people only because they had good vision. These two appeared as if they were conjoined twins, one carrying the other on his back. They were tightly connected together. With both of them wearing entirely black clothes, it was extremely hard to tell the two apart. The person that hopped up had long legs and long arms, standing with his back toward them. The one that he carried seemed lifeless, their head and limbs hanging down. This was only natural. Since the person was dug out from a grave, then it must have been dead. Lifeless was what should have been expected from it. As he thought, the gravedigger suddenly spun around and saw them. There was a mass of thick black mist over the man's face, making it so that nobody could see how their face and features looked. Wei Wuxian knew that he must have casted some sort of strange spell to block his face. Lao Wanqi had already unsheathed Beichin, darted into the cemetery, and started the fight. The gravedigger's reaction was extremely quick. Seeing the attack of Beichin's blue sword glare, he made hand seal and also summoned a sword glare. The sword glare was the same as his face, surrounded by dense mist, and made it so that it was impossible to see what its color and style was. With the corpse on his back, the gravedigger fought in a strange way. The two sword glares clashed a few times. Lawanchi summoned Beechin back and held it in his hand, a layer of frost climbing over his face. Wei Wuxian knew why his face suddenly turned cold. It was because, during the fight, even an outsider like him could tell that the gravedigger was extremely familiar with Lawanchi's sword moves. Lawanchi said nothing. Beechin's attacks were deeper and deeper, attacking with tremendous force. The gravedigger fell back a few times, as if he knew that, with the dead person on his back, he wouldn't be able to win against Lawanchi, and if they continued to fight, he'd be captured alive. He suddenly fished out a dark blue talisman from his waist. A transportation talisman. This type of talisman could instantly transport someone to hundreds of miles away, but it also expended a great amount of spiritual energy. It would take a long time for the user to regain their energy. Those with spiritual energy that wasn't powerful enough wouldn't be able to use them. Thus, although they were of very high quality, it was rare for anybody to use them. Seeing that he was about to escape, Wei Wuxian hurriedly clapped twice, got down on one knee, and slammed his fist on the ground. The strength of his punch passed through layers of dirt, reached the depths of the soil, and penetrated the thick coffin lids, provoking the corpses trapped inside. With crackling noises, 4 bloodied arms shot up from the ground, grabbing both of the gravedigger's legs. The gravedigger seemed as if he didn't care at all. He poured his spiritual energy toward the bottom of his legs, blasting the 4 corpse hands away. Wei Wuxian pulled out his bamboo flute. A shrill, piercing melody ripped open the curtains of darkness that had fallen. 2 human heads emerged from the ground along with their bodies, climbing upward from the gravedigger's legs and winding around his body as if they were snakes. Opening their mouths, they prepared to bite down at his neck and arms. The gravedigger snorted with disdain, as if he was saying, "What a pity trick!" and sent spiritual energy throughout his body. Yet this time, only after he released his energy did he realize that he had been fooled. He sent the corpse that he carried on his back flying off as well. Wei Wuxian laughed uncontrollably as he smacked the tombstone, while Lawanchi caught the flaccid corpse with one hand and attacked with Beechin using the other. Seeing that what he had just dug out had been snatched away, that he couldn't even win solo against Lawanchi, let alone the mischief of another person, he didn't dare to stay any longer. He hurling the transportation talisman on the ground. After a loud noise, blue flames surged up toward the sky. His figure disappeared into the fire. Wei Wuxian knew that the gravedigger had a transportation talisman on him, which meant that even if they caught him, he could find an opportunity to escape. The corpse that he dug out was already a clue, so he didn't have any regrets. He walked over to Lawanchi. "Let's see who he dug out." As he glanced at it, he was somewhat surprised. The head of the corpse had already been split open. From within the cut, there wasn't any blood or brains leaking out, but wads of blackened cotton. Wei Wuxian easily jerked the corpse's head off. With the delicately crafted dummy head, he sobbed. "What is this supposed to mean? There's a fake corpse made of cotton and rags buried in the Changlan cemetery. Having had weighed the corpse in his hands when he took it, Lawanji knew what was wrong. Not all of it is fake. Vaibhushan felt the corpse from head to toe and discovered that, aside from its drooping limbs, only its chest and abdomen felt firm and real. After he tore off the clothes as he expected, he found that only the torso was real. All of the other body parts were fake. The head and limbs made from cotton were to deceive the torso, so that it still thought it was attached to its owner's body. Seeing from the skin tone and the part where the left shoulder cut off, this must be the torso of the dear friend. The gravedigger was here for this. Vaibhushan straightened up. It looks like that the person who hid the corpse already noticed that we are investigating the issue and came to transfer the torso somewhere else, in case we find it. To come early isn't as good as to come in time. We just happened to bump into him. But, with a change of tone, he continued, why was the misfaced gravedigger so familiar with your sex sword style? It was obvious that Lawanji was also thinking about this matter, the coldness on his face yet to fade. Vaibhushan spoke again. His cultivation is quite high, enough to support the energy used for one transportation talisman. He casted spells on both his face and sword. It's understandable that he casted a spell on his face. After all, he wouldn't have wanted to be seen. But most lesser-known cultivators wouldn't have needed to cast a spell on their sword to cover it. Unless, of course, it was either somewhat or very famous in the cultivation world. He'd then have to cover it, because if everyone could recognize his sword glare, his identity would be revealed as soon as his sword was revealed. Vaibhushan asked suggestively, Hangwanjan, from your fight before, do you think that he is someone you know very well? It'd be inconvenient for him to be more specific, such as Lanchi Chen or Lanchiren. Lawanji answered assuredly, no. Vaibhushan was quite confident in Lawanji's answer. To him, Lawanji wasn't the kind of person who would hide or run away from truth. If he denied it, that meant it must have been wrong. He didn't like to lie either. In Vaibhushan's opinion, if someone asked Lawanji to lie, he'd rather silence himself and not talk at all. Thus, Vaibhushan immediately excluded the possibility of the gravedigger being these two. Lawanji put the torso into another double-layered Xiang pouch and put it away properly. The two walked around for a while and wandered back to the street of the liquor shop. The young waiter was true to his words. Most of the other liquor shops on the street had closed already, but their banner was still up and their lights were still on. The waiter was outside eating from a large bowl. Seeing them, he beamed. You're back! We kept our word, didn't we? Did you too seize anything? Vaibhushan laughed as he answered. With Lawanji, he walked back to the table they sat during the day. With liquor jars crowding on the table and by his feet, he spoke. Right, what were we talking about? Suddenly interrupted by the gravedigger. I still don't know how Champion died. Lawanji continued the explanation with simple, direct words. Xiang, Xiang Chen, and Songlan left one by one, some disappearing, some passing away. Quite a few years after the incident passed, one day, Changpian and the remainder of his clan's members died overnight due to Liangqi. Moreover, Changpian's eyes were dug out. This time, nobody could find out who the murderer was. After all, everyone a part of it had vanished. However, there was one thing that could be determined. From the wounds, it could be verified that the sword that was used to Liangqi them had been Xiao Xiangchen's sword, Shuanghua. The bowl of liquor that Wei Wuxian was holding stopped in front of his mouth. He was shocked by this turn of events. He was Liangqi'd by Xiao Xiangchen's sword? Then, was he the one who did it? Lao Wenji. Xiao Xiangchen had disappeared. There were no conclusive evidence. Wei Wuxian. If it couldn't be found alive, then has anyone tried soul summoning? Lao Wenji. Yes, nothing was found. Nothing was found. He either didn't die or his soul had dissolved. As someone who specialized in the area, Wei Wuxian had to comment on the matter. Things like soul summoning, you can't really rely on them too much. Time, place, and person all play a part of it. So of course, it sometimes go wrong. I'm guessing that a lot of people think that it was Xiao Xiangchen's revenge. Han Wenjun, what about you? What do you think? Lao Wenji slowly shook his head. One should not comment without understanding the whole picture. Wei Wuxian admired his attitude and principles a lot. Grinning as he drank another gulp of liquor, he heard Lao Wenji speak again. What about you? Wei Wuxian. Liangqi is a type of torture. It involves punishment anyways. Digging out the eyes also makes it quite hard not to associate with Xiao Xiangchen, who also dug out his eyes. Thus, there's nothing wrong with these people saying that it was Xiao Xiangchen's revenge. However, he thought about how to phrase it. I think that in the beginning, Xiao Xiangchen never asked for Champion's gratitude when he first stepped in. Before he finished thinking of what should follow the eye, the waiter eagerly brought over 2 dishes of peanuts. Having been interrupted, Wei Wuxian didn't need to continue anymore. He looked up at Lao Wenji and smiled. Han Wenjun, why are you looking at me like this? I'm not saying anything. Just like you, I don't understand the whole picture. So I'm not going to comment either. You're right. Before knowing all of the turns and twists, causes and effects, nobody should presume anything about anything. I only ordered 5 jars, but you brought 5 more jars for me. So I'm afraid I won't be able to finish all of them by myself. How about if you drink with me? This isn't the cloud resistance, so it doesn't violate anything, right? He had already prepared himself to be bluntly rejected, but who knew that Lao Wenji replied, I will drink. Wei Wuxian clicked his tongue. Han Wenjun, you really have changed. Before, I drank a tiny jar in front of you, and you got so mad. You even threw me off the wall and hit me. Now, though, you are hiding jars of Emperor's Smile in your room and secretly drinking. Fixing his colors, he answered in a calm voice. I did not touch any jar of Emperor's Smile. Wei Wuxian, why did you hide them if you're not drinking anything? Saving them for me? Fine. You didn't touch them. I'll believe you, okay? Let's talk about something else. Come, I really need to see just how many cups would it take to make an abstinent disciple of the Gusulan sect drunk? He poured a bowl for Lao Wenji. Without any thought, Lao Wenji took it over and drank up. Wei Wuxian was unusually excited, staring at his face to see when it would turn red. Yet, even after he stayed for a while, neither Lao Wenji's face color or expression changed, staring at him calmly with light-colored eyes. There wasn't any change at all. Wei Wuxian was extremely disappointed. As he was about to urge him for another jar, suddenly Lao Wenji frowned and lightly rubbed at between his brows. After a few moments, with a hand supporting his forehead, he closed his eyes. He fell asleep? He fell asleep! After most people drank so much liquor, they should become drunk first and then sleep. How could Lao Wenji skip the step of getting drunk and go to sleep immediately? Drunken was the part that he wanted to see. Wei Wuxian waved at Lao Wenji, whose face remained serious even after he was asleep, then clapped beside his ears. There was no reaction. Lao Wenji was surprisingly the type who collapses after just one bowl. Wei Wuxian didn't expect this sort of situation to happen at all. Thinking as he shook his legs, he put Lao Wenji's right arm around his arm and dragged him out of the liquor shop. He had already familiarized himself with the action of fishing things from Lao Wenji. After taking out the pouch containing money, he found an inn and asked for 2 rooms. He carried Lao Wenji to one of the rooms, took off his boots, tucked him in, and slipped into the night. Stopping at a desolated area, Wei Wuxian took out his flute by his waist, placed it by his lips, and played a melody. After this, he waited silently. In these past few days, Wei Wuxian and Lao Wenji spent their days and nights together. He didn't have any alone time, so he couldn't summon Wen Nian. Aside from hiding his identity in the beginning, there was another reason. Wen Nian had killed the Gusulan sect's people before. Even if Lao Wenji treated Wei Wuxian well, he couldn't summon Wen Nian right in front of him. Or perhaps it was because Lao Wenji treated him well that he didn't have the face to summon Wen Nian in front of him. No matter how thick his face was, this wasn't the time to have a thick face. Before he knew it, the eerie, jingling noises sounded again. With his head lowered, Wen Nian's figure appeared from the shadows of the city wall ahead. He wore all black, melting into the darkness surrounding him. Only his pupilless eyes were a glaring, hideous white. Wei Wuxian put his hands behind him and slowly paced around Wen Nian. Wen Nian shifted, as if wanting to follow his steps, and walked in circles as well. Wei Wuxian commanded, "Stand properly." He complied and stopped moving. It seemed as if his delicate features appeared even more dejected. Wei Wuxian, hand! Wen Nian extended his right arm. Wei Wuxian grabbed his wrist and lifted it up, closely examining the iron cuff and chain locked onto it. This wasn't an ordinary chain. When Xiang flipped out, he became extremely violent, capable of twisting iron into sludge, so he wouldn't have let it drag around like this. It was likely that this was a set of chains created specially to restrain Xiang. Turn to ashes? Trying as hard as they could to restore a damaged piece of Taijian's tiger zeal, of course some sects salivated at the ghost general as well. How could they have been willing to turn him to ashes? With a bitter laugh, he stood by Xiang's side. After considering for a moment, he started to press his fingers into Xiang's hair. The person who kept and restrained Xiang must have prevented him from thinking on his own, to make him listen to other people's orders. Xiang's sanity must have been destroyed, which means that they must have planted something inside his head. As he had expected, after pushing around a few times, Wei Wuxian found a hard nib on an acupoint of the right side of his head. He put his other hand on the left side of Xiang's head and found the same thing, resembling the end of a needle. Wei Wuxian pinched both needles' ends at the same time and gradually pulled two black, long nails from within Xiang's skull. The two nails buried deep inside of Xiang's were round and inch long and as thick as the red strings used for jade pendants. As soon as the nails left his head, Xiang's features quivered faintly. A layer of black lines that resembled strands of blood climbed across the whites of Xiang's eyes. It seemed as if he was trying hard to endure the pain. How strange was it that, although he had died, he could still experience feelings of pain? Judging from the intricate, complex lines carved onto the nails, it must have came from a unique source. The creator was fairly skilled. It'd take quite some time for Xiang to heal completely. Putting them away, Wei Wuxian looked down at the chains on Xiang's wrists and ankles, thinking to himself that it'd be a bit inconvenient for them to hang around and make noise. He'd need to use a cultivational sword to cut them off. The first that he thought of was, of course, Lao Wanji's beaching. Although it's somewhat unbefitting to use the sword of someone from the land sect to cut off Xiang's chains, it was the best cultivational sword that he could get his hands on. He really couldn't let Xiang drag so many burdensome things behind him. Wei Wuxian thought to himself, "Okay, I'll go back to the inn first. If Lanshan is awake, then I won't do anything. If Lanshan is still asleep, I'll quickly burrow Beechen for a while." Having made his decision, he turned around. However, what he didn't expect was that Lao Wanji was standing right behind him. After he summoned Xiang, Wei Wuxian's state of mind was somewhat confused, so it was hard for him to be continuously alert. And if Lao Wanji didn't want someone to notice his arrival, he could do it without any difficulty. Thus, as he turned round and saw the even colder face under the moonlight, his heart almost skipped a beat. He didn't know how long Lao Wanji had been here for, or if he had seen and heard what he was doing. If Lao Wanji had never been drunk in the beginning, and followed him all the way here, the situation would be even more awkward, especially with him not saying anything to Lao Wanji's face and sneaking out to summon Wenyan after Lao Wanji fell asleep. Lao Wanji crossed his arms in front of him and held Bichen in them. His expression was particularly stiff. Wei Wuxian had never seen him with such an obviously displeased expression on his face before. He felt that he needed to speak first and explain the situation, ease the atmosphere. Hang Wenjun! Lao Wanji did not reply. Standing in front of Wenyan, Wei Wuxian stared across at Lao Wanji. He touched his chin and for some reason felt exceptionally guilty. Lao Wanji finally laid down the hands that held Bichen and walked a few steps forward. Seeing that he went toward Wenyan with the sword in his hand, Wei Wuxian thought that he was going to kill Wenyan. Oh no! Don't tell me that Lanshan really pretended to be drunk so that he could kill Wenyan after I summon him. Of course, nobody actually gets drunk after just a ball. He blurted. Hang Wenjun, listen to me. With a loud smack, Lao Wanji hit Wenyan. Although it sounded quite strong, it didn't actually do any damage. Wenyan only staggered a few steps backward after the blow. He wobbled a bit and regained his balance, standing properly again with a blank face. Wenyan wasn't in a state as easily angered as when he flipped out in the past, but his temper wasn't too good either. During the night at Dafan Mountain, nobody could lay a sword on him before everyone was knocked down. He even held someone by his neck. If Wei Wuxian didn't stop him, he would have strangled every single one of the people at the scene. Yet, although Lao Wanji smacked him once, his head was still lowered, appearing as if he didn't dare to resist. Wei Wuxian thought that this was a bit strange, but he nevertheless felt relieved. If Wenyan returned the strike and the two started fighting, it'd be even harder to intervene. As if he didn't think one smack was enough to express his rage, Lao Wanji pushed Wenyan to about 30 feet away. He spoke to Wenyan in an annoyed voice. Go away! Wei Wuxian finally noticed that something was wrong. Both the smack and the push, both his speech and actions were unusually childish. After he pushed Wenyan so that he was far away enough, Lao Wanji seemed as if he was finally satisfied. He turned round and walked over to Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian looked at him scrutinizingly. There wasn't anything wrong with Lao Wanji's face and expression. He was even more serious, proper, flawless than usual. His face wasn't flushed, his breathing wasn't short. He walked around steadily with confidence. It looked like that he was still the calm, righteous cultivator, Hang Wenjun. But as he looked down, he found that Lao Wanji's boots were put on the wrong feet. Before he left, he took Lao Wanji's boots off and tossed them beside the bed. And now, Lao Wanji's left boot was on his right foot, and while his right boot was on his left foot. Hang Wenjun, the prominent cultivator who valued manners greatly, would never have went outside with his clothes like this. Wei Wuxian asked tentatively, Hang Wenjun, what number is this? He made the number 2 with his fingers. Lao Wanji didn't answer and reached his hands out, with one on the left and one on the right, he solemnly wrapped his hands around both of Wei Wuxian's fingers. With a clang, Beijing fell to the ground due to its master's negligence. Wei Wuxian was speechless. This definitely wasn't the normal luncheon. Wei Wuxian. Hang Wenjun, are you drunk? Lao Wenji. No. Drunk people usually didn't admit that they were drunk. Wei Wuxian took his fingers back. Lao Wenji attentively maintained his gesture of how he grasped Wei Wuxian's fingers with both of his hands in loose fists. Wei Wuxian was utterly speechless. Standing amid the chilly night breeze, he removed his gaze from Lao Wenji and looked up at the moon. Most people became drunk before they slept, while Lao Wenji slept before he became drunk. And when he was drunk, he looked no different from how he usually was, which was why it was hard to tell. In the past, Wei Wuxian had countless friends to drink with. He had seen hundreds and thousands of ways people acted when they were drunk. Some wailed loudly, others giggled idiotically, some flounced about, others collapsed immediately. Some were determined in taking their own lives, others whimpered, "Why are you leaving me?" However, this was his first time seeing someone like Lao Wenji, who didn't make any noise, looked decent, yet acted strangely. The corners of his lips twitched. Trying not to laugh, he picked up Pigeon from the ground and carried into his bag. Okay, let's go back. He definitely couldn't let Lao Wenji roam around outside like this. Who knew what else he could do? Luckily, it seemed that Lao Wenji was also quite easygoing when he was drunk. With an elegant nod, they went off. If someone passed by, they would have thought that these were two good friends strolling in the night and praised the refined act. Behind them, Wenyan silently followed. Just as Wei Wuxian was about to speak to him, Lao Wenji whirled around and angrily smacked him once more. This time it was on Wenyan's head. Wenyan's head was even more lowered due to the smack. Even though his facial muscles were rigid and couldn't make any sort of expressions, even though his eye whites couldn't make any sort of gazes, for some reason he still looked as if he had been wronged. Not knowing whether to frown or laugh, Wei Wuxian grabbed Lan Wenji's arm. "What are you hitting him for?" Lao Wenji spoke to Wenyan in a threatening tone that he definitely wouldn't have used if he was awake. "Go away!" Wei Wuxian knew that he shouldn't disobey someone who was drunk. He hurried. Okay, it's up to you. I'll make him go away if that's what you want." As he spoke, he took out his bamboo flute. But before he even placed the flute to his lips, Lao Wenji quickly grabbed it. "Do not play for him," Wei Wuxian teased. "Why are you so pushy?" Lao Wenji repeated angrily. "Do not play for him." Wei Wuxian discovered that although people who were drunk often had a lot of things to say, as Lao Wenji usually didn't like to speak, he would repeatedly say the same words after he drank. Seeing that Lao Wenji had never been too fond of demonic techniques, he might have not liked how he used his flute to control Wenyan. Anyway, he had to pet him in the direction of his fur. Of course. "All right, I'm only going to play for you, okay?" Lao Wenji announced his satisfaction with the but continued to play with the flute in his hands, unwilling to return it. Wei Wuxian could only whistle. He spoke to Wen Nian. "Keep on hiding. Make sure nobody finds you." Wen Nian seemed as if he really wanted to follow, but having received his commands and being scared that Lao Wenqi would hit him a few more times, he slowly turned round. Dragging the chains behind him, he walked away dejectedly. Wei Wuxian turned to Lao Wenqi. "Lanchan, now that you are drunk, why doesn't your face flush at all?" Since Lao Wenqi looked too normal, almost even more normal than Wei Wuxian, he couldn't help but to talk to him as if he was talking to an ordinary person. Yet, unexpectedly, after Lao Wenqi heard this, he reached out, grabbed his shoulder, and pulled him into his arms. Caught off guard, Wei Wuxian's head was slammed right into his chest. As he was recovered from the dizziness, Lao Wenqi's voice came from the above. "The heartbeats." "What?" Lao Wenqi. "The face doesn't show anything. Listen to the heartbeats." As he spoke, his chest vibrated from the low voice. A heart pulsated steadily and continuously. Thump, thump. It was a bit fast. Wei Wuxian understood and looked up again. "I won't be able to tell from your face, only if I listen to your heartbeat." Lao Wenqi answered sincerely, Wei Wuxian bent over in laughter. Was Lao Wenqi's face so thick that the blush couldn't even be seen? He wasn't this sort of person, was he? And Lao Wenqi was so honest after he was drunk. His actions and comments were also bolder. Since this was a rare occasion to see such an honest, open Lao Wenqi, it would have been impossible to Wei Wuxian to treat him with respect and not play any tricks. He hurried Lao Wenqi back to the inn. Entering the room, he held him down on the bed and took off the boots that were put on raw. Guessing that he probably didn't know how to wash his own face in such a state, he took off Lao Wenqi's forehead ribbon and brought in a basin of hot water along with a towel. Wringing the towel out, he folded it into a square and gently rubbed Lao Wenqi's face. During the process, Lao Wenqi didn't resist at all, obediently allowing his face to be kneaded in all kinds of directions. Aside from the squinting, when the towel went near his eyes, he stared at Wei Wuxian without even blinking. Wei Wuxian had a ton of amusing ideas inside his head. Seeing his clear gaze, he couldn't help brushing a finger against Lao Wenqi's chin. He laughed. "Why are you looking at me? Am I good looking?" He just happened to have finished cleansing. Before Lao Wenqi could answer, Wei Wuxian tossed the towel into the basin. "Your face is clean now. Do you want to have some water first?" Having heard no answer from behind him, he turned round only to see Lao Wenqi holding the basin in his hands, his face already buried inside. Wei Wuxian almost paled from the shock. He grabbed the basin and moved it away at once. "I didn't mean the water in here." Lao Wenqi raised his head calmly. Transparent droplets of water rolled down his jaw, seeping into the front of his collars. Looking at him, Wei Wuxian wasn't sure how to describe what he was feeling right now. Did he drink the water or did he not? Hopefully Lanchan doesn't remember anything after he wakes up. Or else, for the rest of his life, he wouldn't be able to face anyone. Wei Wuxian used his sleeves to wipe off the drops of water on Lao Wenji's jaw and put his arms around him. Hangguanjun, now, are you going to do whatever I told you to do? Lao Wenji, Wei Wuxian, you'll answer whatever I ask you? Wei Wuxian put one knee on the bed and smirked. Okay, let me ask you. Have you secretly tasted the emperor's smile you hid in your room? Lao Wenji, no. Wei Wuxian, do you like rabbits? Lao Wenji, yes. Wei Wuxian, have you ever violated any rules before? Lao Wenji, yes. Wei Wuxian, have you ever liked anyone? Lao Wenji, yes. All of Wei Wuxian's questions were just for the sake of them, not that he really wanted to find out about Lao Wenji's private matters. He simply wanted to know whether or not Lao Wenji would really answer whatever he asked. He continued, how about Jiangchen? A frown. Wei Wuxian, how about Vinya? Indifferent. Wei Wuxian grinned and pointed at himself. How about this one? Lao Wenji, mine. Lao Wenji stared at him, slowly and articulately stating, mine. Wei Wuxian suddenly understood. He took Bichen off his back, thinking to himself, when I pointed at myself, Lanchan probably thought that this one meant Bichen. He got off the bed and walked around the room with Bichen in his hand, from the left to the right, from the east to the west. As he had expected, Lao Wenji's gaze closely followed wherever he walked, ever so sincere and straightforward, ever so blunt and bare. Wei Wuxian's legs almost gave out under Lao Wenji's heated gaze. He lifted Bichen in front of his eyes. Do you want it? Lao Wenji, I want it. As if he thought that this wasn't enough to prove his desire, Lao Wenji grasped the hand that Wei Wuxian held Bichen with and stared into his eyes with those light-colored pupils. Taking in a soft breath, he repeated his words, emphasizing every syllable. I want it. Wei Wuxian knew that Lao Wenji was desperately drunk, that it wasn't directed at him, yet those three words still crashed into him, taking away the strength in his arms and legs.